Thank you. I've had such a good day. Thank you, Laura, for sharing. I really enjoyed you talking today. My topic is restoring hope when depression hurts. And I think this is such an important topic for women because we are caretakers and nurturers of other people. So even if you are not suffering with depression or have ever had a bout of depression, you probably know someone that does. 1 in 5 people in America will suffer from depression. So I'm certain that all of us, I mean, not just from what we're doing today, someone on the that's watching today probably has depression. So it's really important for us to know about that. The writer of Hebrews assures us, believers, that we will have times of need in our lives. This is from Hebrews 4:16. So we know that we're going to have struggles. If we have struggles, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're depressed. So it's important to know the difference between what is a struggle and what's depression. So I want us to talk about that. We need to be familiar with causes and symptoms of depression so we can kind of understand if we're just going through a struggle or if we're dealing with depression. So I want to talk about causes first. Some common causes are stress, fear, loneliness, guilt, anger, and our circumstances. And I'm going to give you some examples from the Bible where some of the characters in the Bible had depression and what their causes were. David wrote of his depression, and it was caused by unconfessed sin. This is in Psalms 38. I think this one, a lot of times Christians can get confused and think that if someone has depression, there's some undisclosed sin in their life. And people can really harp on that person and condemn them and try to get them to figure out what sin it is that they haven't confessed yet. That may be a cause of depression, but it is not the cause of depression. So remembering that it may not be that they have to pray and figure out what that undisclosed sin is yet. Their depression may have nothing to do with that, but that is one cause. Another cause from Nehemiah 1:2, God uses depression as a signal to get Nehemiah attention to do his work. Job had financial, personal, and relationship losses. That comes from Job 1-3. And Elijah had a great letdown after a huge victory. And this is from 1 Kings 19:4. With that, you can even just think about Christmas time. If you enjoy the holidays, some people do and some people don't. But let's say you're someone that enjoys it. And you've got your tree up and you have family that come in. You have a big celebration. And then when Christmas is over, sometimes people can dip down. And so that's not obviously as big as having a big victory and a letdown from that. But it can be as simple as, well, I've been looking forward to this one event and now that event is over. So those are some causes of depression. Also, there can be medical causes. Thyroid issues, diabetes issues, hormone changes, heart issues. 80% of people that have a heart surgery will have a bout of depression. That's a lot, and that's not something that's talked about a lot. So 8 out of 10 people that have any kind of surgery on their heart will struggle with depression afterwards. So we need to be proactive and think about that. So it could be a medical reason. Also, nutrition shortages, B12 and low iron, those are definitely times that that can cause depression. There are other things besides those, but I just wanted you guys to be familiar with those things. The next thing that I really want to talk about, and take a lot of time talking about is symptoms. It's super important for us to understand what the symptoms are so we know what to look for. If you go to Psalms 102, that is a literal checklist from David of the symptoms that he had. And what's amazing about that, there's something called the DSM. It's the Diagnostical and Statistical Manual for Psychiatric Disorders. So it's sort of like the PDR, the physician's desk reference. So if you go to the doctor and you have an earache or pancreatitis, anything is kind of in that PDR. Well, the same thing is true for the DSM. Any psychiatric psychiatric illness is listed in there, and it will tell you what symptoms they are and how long you have to have them for you to be able to be diagnosed with something. And what's amazing is the list that David gives us very much matches up with what's in the DSM. So I'm just going to go over some of those for you. I need to put my readers on. Okay, he says, let me cry, let my cry come to you, do not hide your face. So we know that, and he also talks about weeping. So we know that crying and isolating and being withdrawn, those are both symptoms. You know, a lot of times people feel like they're weak or they shouldn't cry. Shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. But excessive crying, but in intensity or frequency, that can be a symptom of depression, along with other things. He says he felt stricken physically, and he felt like he was losing meaning to his life. This is super common for depression. People feel like they don't have a purpose. They have lots of somatic complaints, which means they can have more headaches, they can have more stomach aches, body aches. They have difficulty eating along with their stomach issues. He said he lost his appetite. He forgot to eat his bread. So that is also a symptom of depression. Sometimes we lose our appetite and sometimes we eat too much. So if we think about symptoms of depression, it can go either way. I can have an increase in something or a decrease in something. So some people may be overeating. Some people, a lot of times they can't rest. You know, David talks about not being able to lie down, that he's lying awake. And so for some people, they sleep too much. So that's what can be confusing about depression. It can be an excess in something or a lack of something. So he couldn't sleep. We need to pay attention to these kinds of things if they last for 2 weeks or more. So if I'm having some of these symptoms and it keeps going for a couple of weeks, then I need to really pay attention to it. The other thing is if someone in your home or someone in your small group or someone that you work with, people that are in your environment and community, if you notice that they're withdrawing, they're not eating, they're not concentrating, if you notice some of those things in them, you might want to just talk to them and try to reach out to them and help nurture them and just kind of ask them about it and be honest. You know, people are afraid to ask about how someone's doing because they're afraid of the answer and they won't know what to do. And you don't have to have the right answer. Just being there and being supportive can make that person feel validated and heard, which is really important because their tendency is going to be one to isolate, which is what Satan wants them to do. And God made us for relationships, so he's going to want us to reach out and do that even when it's difficult. Depression drains our energy. Feel exhausted and tired and fatigued. And it can even be for someone that is oversleeping. So maybe they're sleeping all the time, but when they wake up, they still feel fatigued and tired and don't understand why. There's a lack of concentration. Oftentimes, there is short-term memory disturbance. And so just very forgetful, can't remember from one day to the next what they did. They try to tell you what they did this morning, can't recall that. Some of that is just normal in different phases of life, but what I want you to think about is if I'm having multiple of these things. So it's normal and irritability is a sign of depression. So I might be irritable for a few days. That doesn't mean I'm depressed. But am I irritable? I can't sleep. I can't concentrate. You know, when they start adding up and you start having more than one symptom and they last for a long time, we really need to pay attention to it. Elijah was known as one of the greatest prophets. He lost his appetite. His thinking got distorted. He withdrew from everyone. Jezebel threatened him and he reacted in fear. Fear and anxiety go hand in hand. Fear and depression. 70% of people that have depression will also experience some anxiety. That's a big number. So 7 out of 10. And Elijah shows us that he went through that. What is so neat, though, is God responded with mercy for him. He did not condemn him for his condition. What he did for Elijah, he provided rest for him. He provided food for him. And then he encouraged him to continue in his ministry. So he gave him rest, he gave him food, he took care of him physically, and then he said, now go. And so when he went, he was volunteering, he was thinking of others, getting the focus off of him. So when you get to a place that you get more stable physically, then you can go and do other things. And sometimes we can get confused and think we need to do that first. So if you're going and trying to do your ministry and you're still depressed and haven't done anything to take care of that, you get more drained and more exhausted and more frustrated, and your self-talk gets even worse. So we think about, okay, I've got to stop and take care of myself. So here is a really neat acronym that can help you stop. It's called HALT, H-A-L-T. So just like we stop ourselves, we halt. The H stands for hungry. The A stands for anger. The L stands for lonely. And the T stands for tired. So all of those things you can see are physical things. And those are the things that God did for Elijah. He stopped him. He gave him food. He gave him rest. He gave him some compassion and community. So if we stop ourselves, because what happens is we fall back into old habits when we are depressed or we're having a hard time, or if an addiction comes back up. So anything circumstantially that happens, we might fall back into things that aren't good for us, even though, because they feel comfortable. So they may not be healthy. So if I stop myself and I say, okay, I'm hungry, so I need to eat. So I'm going to put in food, like think of the colors of the rainbow. I'm going to think of things that have nutrition, and remember iron and B12 are important. So I'm going to put some vegetables and fruits and protein. I'm going to eat things that are healthy, and I'm going to take care of myself. Sometimes if I just stop and eat, maybe I haven't eaten in a day or two because I'm depressed, just getting that fuel to my brain can help me to feel better, and then I can think better. And so that cycle gets better. Instead of having distorted thinking, my thinking gets better. So if I stop myself, I'm not hungry. Let's look at the A. If I'm angry, okay, if I'm angry, I might make some choices that I don't normally want to make, or that look to behaviors from my past. Anger is the secondary emotion. We have primary emotions and secondary emotions, just like primary and secondary colors. And so with anger, what it covers is hurt, fear, and frustration. So if I think about, okay, I'm really angry, what's going on underneath that? Are my feelings hurt? Am I fearful and afraid of something? Am I frustrated? So I take whichever thing it is and I try to take care of that thing. So if I'm angry and I figure out really my friend Susie hurt my feelings, then I need to take care of that hurt. And God says we go to someone and we speak the truth to love in that with them and try to work something out. So I take care of that emotion instead of falling back on something that's not good for me. If I'm lonely, then I need to reach out. This is very difficult to do when I'm depressed. When we have depression, we want to isolate. Like I said earlier, Satan wants you to isolate and just shut that down. And what we need to do is God made us for a relationship with him and with other people. So I need to pray. I need to open his word. I need to force myself to be in relationship with God, even if I would rather just lay there with my covers pulled over my head. I need to reach out to friends. If I struggle with depression, then I kind of need to have, say, 3 or 4 people that know that and that I'm willing to reach out to and say, hey, this is what's going on with me. And maybe they just come sit on your bed if you can't get out of bed. But being in relationship with people when you're lonely is really, really important. And then the T stands for tired. And so a lot of times with depression, like I said, you may not be sleeping at all. You maybe have frequent awakenings. You may have trouble going to sleep. You may have trouble getting out of bed. So anytime something like that's going on, you've got to figure out how you can get some rest, and having a good bedtime routine can be helpful with that. The other thing is, if you care, say you don't have depression, but you care about someone that does, or one of your friends is, when you notice they're doing those things, you reach out to them and try not to take it personally when they reject you, because they may just want to be by themselves so bad that they say, no, I don't want you to come over. Or they may not return your text, that kind of thing. So the more they're withdrawing, probably the more that you need to pray for them and try to be there for them and help them to be in relationship. So that's HALT. I would like to add an S to the end. So if you Google HALT, that's a real thing, but I always add an S, so that's not going to be on there. So I say HALTs. And my S is stressed and sick. Because I believe that when you're stressed about circumstances or when you're physically ill, those times you're going to be more susceptible to be depressed or anxious as well. So you might want to just throw that one on there. The good thing is that we do have hope. We always have hope. Jesus came for us, for every single one of us. He got on that cross for me and for you. So no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what's going on medically with you, anything that's happening like that, God is still there for you, and you can receive Jesus, and you can get into his word, and you can listen to some music like we listened to this morning when it started. It was so beautiful. Put that worship music in and put that truth in, and there is a hope for you. God has perfect plans for your life. So you can have depression and have joy. You can have depression and have hope. And I think people can get confused about that. It's kind of like they think I don't have space for both things to be true. So you might hear people say something more like, I'm a believer, but I'm depressed. So that but kind of discounts the I'm a believer part. And what I want you to remember is I can be depressed and I can be a believer. So we can hold space for both things. And the more truth that you put in to try to counteract those negative thoughts, the more you're going to believe that you have hope. And the more you have hope, the more you can choose joy. And the more you choose joy, some of those symptoms might go down. So just like depression cycles downward, when we have hope, that can cycle upwards. And if you're struggling with that, that doesn't mean that you're not a good Christian. It doesn't mean that you're not praying hard enough. Remember, we talked about all those causes of depression. And so it may be completely out of your control. And remember, just like with Elijah, he did not condemn him. He doesn't condemn you either. And so remembering that we have hope in him is so important. I hope these things help you to understand what depression is, what the causes are, what kind of symptoms we might need to look out for, and how we need to reach out for other people.
Okay, thank you so much, Tracey. I want to add a couple of things to what Tracey shared with you. Tracey and Debbie are professional counselors, but what's more important is they are Christian counselors. Michelle was on here, maybe she left, but Michelle is a Christian counselor in a school environment. A lot of times when we seek help outside the body of Christ. And I'm a firm believer that I want like-minded people. I want people that go to the same sources that I go to, right? So if I'm seeking Christian therapy or seeking Christian counseling, they're going to come from a completely different perspective than somebody that's outside the body of Christ. They're going to constantly be concerned about where my spiritual health is as well as where my mental health is. And I hope that makes sense to everybody, but if you ever need counseling, I really, really recommend that you seek Christian counseling. I cannot think of the name of your center offhand. Can you come back on and share that, please?
Sure. We work at Branches Counseling Center. And Debbie's on here now. Hey, Debbie. We are in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we have offices in Shelbyville and Mount Juliet as well. the neat thing about us is our pastoral counselors are allowed to do counseling across state lines. So we have some of our counselors, Debbie is one that is allowed to do that. And then for our state licensed counselors, we're able to do it with people all throughout the state of Tennessee. So we can reach people nationally.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I apologize, I couldn't remember
Oh,
that.
that's okay. You have a lot.